It became a question now about the colonization of Cyprus. They were talking about Cyprus as being a springboard to the promised land and a kind of plan B. Israel is a gigantic US military base masquerading as a country. And the false narrative is that God promised this land to the Jewish people to the exclusion of all other people. And because it is theirs by divine right, they are entitled to do whatever they feel is necessary or appropriate to secure exclusive control over this land, even if it means wiping out the indigenous population. And every major country in the West is supporting this aggressive, monstrous, illegal expansion of the boundaries of Israel, is because Western power is slipping away. And so I think Cyprus is kind of in the crosshairs, but it's really not the primary objective. The primary objective is Western a stranglehold. You know, Cyprus is unfortunately, in one way, it's blessed to be so important, but it's also a curse for the people of Cyprus. Let's be clear. My view is that Zionism is a cancer. If people are coming to my country to propagate this sinister ideology, I don't want them there. I don't care what their nationality is.
Welcome back. Our guest today is Dimitri Lascaris. He's an award-winning lawyer and journalist based in Montreal, Canada. After he graduated from the University of Toronto Faculty of Law, Dimitri began his career at the Wall Street firm Sullivan and Cromwell before returning to Canada, where he prosecuted major securities fraud class actions, and he recovered hundreds of millions of dollars for defrauded investors. He's been named by Canadian Lawyer Magazine as one of the 25 most influential lawyers in Canada, and by Canadian Business Magazine as one of the 50 most influential figures in Canadian business. For a decade, he served as a board member and a correspondent for the Real News Network in Baltimore. And today he's a freelance journalist whose reporting exposes Western government criminality and power abuses. Work he now continues on his own YouTube channel, Reason to Resist. Dimitri, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Susie. Pleasure to be here.
The pleasure's all mine. So Dimitri, your recent investigation was here in Cyprus, and it exposed the realities that very few in the West are even aware of, from land purchases and political influence to censorship and ideology. For the sake of context, if you will spare me, especially for my predominantly Western audience, allow me to give a bit of background before we dive in.
Sure.
So during that recent trip of yours to Cyprus, you conducted a ground investigation into the enormous influx of Israeli investors, immigrants, and tourists now entering this island nation. And I'll provide a link to your investigative video in the description box below our interview. So for viewers who want to watch your findings. So in Cyprus, a quiet transformation is actually underway. Thousands of Israeli Jews, they're making their home here each year. They're buying land, they're opening Zionist schools, they're forming enclaves. Israeli firms are rapidly acquiring key economic assets and large areas of land. Even Haaretz, back in August 2023, run the headline, "Is Cyprus the second Israel?" Link of which I'll also provide. The Israeli population has surged from about 400 to over 12,000 in just 2 decades, with several daily flights now connecting Israel to Cyprus's 2 airports. In fact, a simple look at the Hermes Airport's website, which I did today. Hermes manages both airports of Cyprus in Larnaca and Paphos, revealed that there were 13 flights from Israel to Larnaca from both Tel Aviv and Haifa today, and 5 more flights to Paphos. That's 18 flights in a single day, Dimitri, based on easily accessible public information available on the Hermes Airport's website. So my question now, how extensive is this Israeli penetration in economic, demographic, political terms, and how does it tie into the broader influence that Israel wields on the island through security cooperation, surveillance technology, and media narratives?
So I just want to clarify one thing. You may not be aware of this, Susie, but I actually did 2 investigative reports. And the first one I did about a year ago.
A year ago, yes.
And that one was entitled Israelis Flooding into Cyprus to Buy Anything in Sight.
I'll also provide a link to that.
Please do. It was widely watched. It was one of our most popular videos, and it focused on Paphos and a resort to the north of Paphos in the northwestern part of the island called the Secret Forest, which is quite a huge and luxurious resort. Anyways, so that was the first part. And then the second part, I decided to focus on Larnaca and Limassol, because I had received reports from people on the island. The people were coming to me that I'd never actually met before, and they were reaching out to me through my website and reporting major developments in that part of the island. So I came back to do another report. And what started this off, the reason why I became interested in this in the first place was because I formed the view very quickly after this genocide began in Palestine in October of 2023, that given the level of Israeli aggression, not just towards Palestinians, but towards the Lebanese, the Syrians, the Iranians, the Yemenis, and so forth, Israel was going to find itself in a multi-front war. And this very small country, I've been there 5 times, it's a very small country, in many ways economically and militarily vulnerable. And the population there, frankly, is rather spoiled compared to the people who live in the region. They have a much higher quality of life. And they're accustomed to a certain level of, shall we say, luxury and ease that other people in the region do not experience generally. And I quickly came to the conclusion that there was going to be a massive outflow. Many people were going to leave Israel because they have options. They could go live in the West. They have double citizenship. And so I was getting reports, very quickly from people on the ground that at various points in the Mediterranean, particularly Cyprus and Greece, a lot of Israelis were showing up. So that's why I first went to Cyprus, to see that some confirmation of my hypothesis that there was going to be a massive outflow. But it quickly became something else. And that is that I learned in the course of researching the first report that the early Zionists had designs on Cyprus. Going all the way back to the 1800s, they were talking about Cyprus as being a springboard to the promised land and a kind of plan B. So this the story took on a different angle, rather than it being simply about, people fleeing Israel, Jewish Israelis fleeing Israel because of the warmongering of the government and the dangers this exposed the country to. It became a question now about the colonization of Cyprus. And so I decided to come back to explore it from that angle a few months ago, and discovered really and I'm sure I've only scraping the surface, Susie, because I have to go on the basis of publicly available information and tips that I get from people who live there. So I suspect that there is a lot more property being bought up about which we know nothing. And it would be very difficult for the public to learn about it because of the secrecy surrounding these transactions.
That's true. This modern influx has deep historical roots. You have said that Cyprus's current role can't be understood without looking back more than a century, as you just mentioned. My input on this is that you are right. In 1899, Zionist leader David Treich, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Treich, he proposed Cyprus as a Jewish colony, a moment in history that, as Ynet News reported in its August 11, 2023 article, Cyprus from the lost Jewish colony to today's Israel settlement, carries modern implications that are impossible to ignore. I'm also going to provide a link to that. And I'd like to also share with you an episode largely unknown to Western audiences, yet historically significant in the post-World War II diplomatic discussions surrounding the establishment of the State of Israel. I don't know if you're aware of this, since you have visited Cyprus on a number of occasions, and if any locals have told you this story, but I know of this story from my mom, who is from those areas, who knows it from her parents. So between 1946 and 1949, over 53,000 Jewish refugees, mostly Holocaust survivors, were detained by the British here in Cyprus in internment camps near Karaolos, outside today's Turkish-occupied Famagusta. Are you aware of that? So, and according...
I was not aware of that, but it doesn't surprise me at all that the British would do such a thing.
But this is how it goes. According to U.S. diplomatic records and Zionist archives, the idea of Cyprus as the site for their Jewish homeland was quietly discussed by American and British officials at the time, but it was firmly rejected by Zionist leaders like David Ben-Gurion, who insisted only Palestine would do. So I'm going to include the link to the Ynet News article that I mentioned earlier. Let's, I don't know if you're finding this interesting.
Yes.
Let's pick up from where we left off. In your series, you suggested that what's unfolding in Cyprus may be part of a larger design, the Greater Israel Doctrine, stretching from the Nile to the Euphrates, and now manifesting itself twofold, militarily in some countries, but economically in others. So how do you view this moment in history? Because it is a moment in history. People are starting to grasp this, even outside the region, finally, because this Greater Israel Doctrine, we've been talking about it, but they've been calling us anti-Semites for a long time. We're not anti-Semites, but we are anti-Zionists. So how do you view this moment in history and the irony that Cyprus, once rejected by them, is now being so heavily bought up and settled?